We have a lot to cover. So I think that what has just happened, and I'm going to go over everything today about the referendum and that kind of thing, is Putin's off ramp. How Putin's going to try to declare victory in a heads I win, tails you lose kind of way. I'll try to explain my case, and you'll see everything laid out. So I think that if he can declare victory over having a referendum, as illegal as it looks like, in the Donbass areas of Luhansk and Donetsk, and then Zaporizhzhia and even Kherson. These four areas, that's more than the two that he looked like he was going to get, and he can declare victory. And then he can say, look, we just want to have peace in this area. And if the Ukrainians keep going, which they inevitably will, then he has the ability to mobilize a fuller force. So this is either he wins with the declared victory that he's going to get, because they're all going to go, yes, 99% of us want to join you, or he's going to have this excuse to more fully mobilize, because now that you have done this, it's like striking at Mother Russia. So what I'm going to do here is invert what I have normally done, and I'm going to actually look at the news through the Russian lens. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you that on the 23rd, when they're starting to have the referendum, 23rd, Friday the 23rd at 1 o'clock, I'm going to be doing another Q&A. So look for that and join me. Put it on your calendar now. Join me for the Q&A live stream on the 23rd. Okay, let's get to this. Now, the first thing is, this is the picture in the thumbnail. I chose it for a reason, because this goes back quite a bit. This is a Ukrainian pulling up the fence post between Ukraine and the Soviet Union so that the Soviet Union and Ukraine can join together. And this is what it says: Soviet World War II propaganda poster. Ukrainian text reads, "Electors of the working people, vote for joining Western Ukraine into the Soviet Ukraine, for the united, free, and thriving Ukraine Soviet Socialist Republic. Let's forever eliminate the border between Western and Soviet Ukraine. Long live the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic." Well, you can see how well that worked. So here's what I want to do today. I'm going to reverse my role. I'm going to not only read the news from the uh, Russian perspective, but I'm going to take the Russian perspective. Now, I'm just acting. I don't actually see things this way, and please understand that and don't take me out of context. But here we go. We're going to look at the news backwards from what I normally do. We're going to start with this. Foreign Minister Lavrov on an urgent referendum initiatives in the Donetsk People's Republic and the Zaporizhzhia region. Throughout a special military operation and before it, we insisted that the people in those regions should be able to decide on their future. Current situation confirms that they want to be masters of their destiny, and they're going to get the ability to be masters of their destiny. And the Russian administration has been faithful to promising this for them since they recognized them in late February, before they were forced to invade Ukraine in order to guarantee that. Here's RT article: peaceful solution to the Ukrainian crisis currently not possible in Russia. And it's not, because the Ukrainians are unreasonable. They will not abide by their agreements. They are forcing us to have to fight them in order to get to a solution. The armed conflict in Ukraine cannot be resolved through negotiations under current circumstances, says the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov. At the moment, such a prospect cannot be observed. Moscow blames Kyiv for the suspension of peace talks. Moscow has reached out multiple times to offer all sorts of peace agreements. All they had to do was recognize the sovereignty of Donetsk and Luhansk. And all they had to do was agree that they were not going to join NATO, and we could have had peace a long time ago. But the Nazis in Ukraine have continued to impudently act as if they could stand against the Russians. The Ukrainian government ended talks in April after accusing Russian troops of having committed war crimes that have not been established by our media, hoaxes in Bucha. Zelensky said publicly that he is not ready to talk to Russia, and Putin said that, well, that's fine by us. Finally, Ukraine launched a major military counteroffensive in its northeast. At the same time, Russian troops pulled back to regroup from some areas, which served to avoid major losses, and were now even stronger in those areas where we regrouped. Okay, here is some Western imperialist propaganda. This is Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Now, you have to understand that Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty, they were established during the Cold War in order to pump Western propaganda into the Soviet sphere. So just with that, take that as a grain of salt as you go forward. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said Washington rejected any such referendums unequivocally. Referendums that we're talking about today. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and President Emmanuel Macron, you both used the words sham to describe the referendums that pro-Moscow separatists said would be held starting on September 23rd in 4 territories occupied by Russia. Well, they got this fact straight, that it is starting on September 23rd in 4 territories occupied by Russia, but that it's a sham, or unequivocally, let the people of those territories have their free votes. And if they want to join Russia, then they should be able to join Russia. Joseph Borrell, the chief talking head from the European Union, said that Russia and its political leadership and all those involved in this referenda and other violations of international law will be held accountable. Ukrainian President Zelensky hailed Western condemnation of these referendums. Of course he did. I thank all the friends and partners of Ukraine for their massive and firm condemnation of Russia's intentions to organize yet more pseudo-referendums. Pseudo-referendums. They should have a free vote, and if or when they decide that they want to leave Ukraine and rejoin Mother Russia, they should be free to do so. In Crimea in 2014, after the CIA-sponsored coup that happened in Kyiv, the official result of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea was a 97% vote for integration with the region into the Russian Federation, with an 83% turnout. Where do you see that anywhere in the world? The people here really wanted to leave Ukraine and the Nazis that are running it. Okay, we're going to look at tasks. The Donbas republics are ready for referendums to join Russia, says the LPR envoy. So the LPR ambassador to Moscow told the Rossiya 24 channel the heads of the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics made an agreement to coordinating and synchronizing efforts to prepare for a referendum, which means that the process has been in fact launched. It is now being formalized. Work is underway to figure out all the mechanisms that need to be used to organize the vote. He also said on Monday the Civic Chamber of Luhansk People's Republic called on the LPR leader Leonid Peshnig to immediately hold a referendum on recognizing the republic as a Russian constituent entity. So we want to be reunited with Russia. World War III in the making, according to Pravda. World War III in the making right now as Russia readies something big. Okay, French President Emmanuel Macron says, the idea of referendums, if it weren't so tragic, it would be funny. The United States will never recognize Russian claims to any parts of Ukraine. Jacob Sullivan said that Washington was aware of the, quote, potential mobilization that could take place in Russia. Zelensky's press secretary, Nikiforov, said without the referendums, there are still the slightest chance for a diplomatic solution. After the referendum, there is none. Oh, he's a hypocrite. Zelensky has said many times on his own that there is the only referendum that you're going to have, or the only peace agreements that you're going to have, is actually the peace that's going to be made through the battlefield. So NATO is not going to recognize these referendums as legitimate, said NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg. Germany will not recognize referendums in the self-proclaimed LPR, DPR, KHERSON, Zaporizhzhia regions, said German Chancellor Scholz. So all these Western powers always talking about democracy are hypocrites because they won't recognize a democratic vote. NATO denounces Donbas referendums. NATO General Secretary Jens Stoltenberg said sham referendums have no legitimacy and do not change the nature of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, a further escalation in the Russian President Vladimir Putin's war. The international community must condemn this blatant violation of international law. What international law? Like, whose international law? The West is constantly talking about how international law this and international law this. It's just international law that supports the West and their empire of lies and their minions. The Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics will hold a vote for unification with Russia on September 23rd through 27th, and it can't come fast enough. The U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says that we will never recognize this territory as anything other than part of Ukraine. Several regions of Ukraine refuse to recognize the legitimacy of the government of Kyiv after the backed coup against the elected president in 2014. So we had a president who was actually elected by the people in 2014, and when there was a CIA-backed, US-backed coup in 2014, Crimea then decided that by referendum to rejoin Russia, and the coup government did not recognize Crimea. So that's what has gone on here. There was a legitimate government. The Crimeans, the people in the Donbass that rebelled against, were faithful to the previous government, which was duly elected as opposed to overthrown by Western powers. Worst fears in Donbass referendums. Here's former President Medvedev. Donbass referendums on joining Russia will be of great importance for the systemic defense of the local population, former Russian president and deputy head of the Russian Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, said. An encroachment on Russian territory is a crime. So, after the referendums, if the people choose, and they probably will, to join Russia, further attacks on those territories, they will be crossing international borders and attacking Mother Russia herself. That will require us to more fully mobilize and to defend our homeland. The votes will be between September 23rd and 27th. Russia is recognized the two territories as independent in February, but Ukraine has failed to do so. Russia sent troops into Ukraine on February 24th, citing Kyiv's failure to implement the Minsk agreements. And this is true. They never implemented the Minsk agreements, which were supposed to require these contested areas to hold referendums. September, today, we're looking at Wednesday is the 21st, Thursday is the 22nd, and the 23rd through 27th are Friday through Tuesday. Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson regions to become part of Russia. Leonid Peshnev, head of the Luhansk People's Republic, signed this law for a popular vote on the republic to become part of the Russian Federation. The referendum is ultimate direct expression of the will of the residents of the region. I don't understand why Ukraine can't get that through their head. If the people want to go, let them go. On September 19th, the public chamber of the Luhansk People's Republic turned to Leonid Peshnev with an initiative immediately to hold a referendum on recognizing the republic as subject to Russia. Joining Russia will secure the territory of the republic and guarantee return to a peaceful life. This is the only way they can return to a peaceful life. Otherwise, the Ukrainians will just keep coming. It is believed that the Russian administration has come to understand the need to fight till absolute victory or defeat. Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia region bids to join Russia. The Zaporizhzhia region in northeast Ukraine will hold a referendum on those same days. We are ready to fulfill our right for self-determination and settle once and for all the issue of this territorial status of our region. Earlier on Tuesday, a similar initiative was also pursued by Kherson. So it's not only the Donbass of Luhansk and Donetsk, it's also going to be Kherson and Zaporizhzhia joining Russia. Russia sent troops to Ukraine on February 24th, citing Kyiv's failure to implement the Minsk agreements designed to give the regions of Donetsk and Luhansk special status within the Ukrainian state. They're supposed to be able to vote, and they were never afforded the opportunity to vote. Now, in the Duma, a bill has been passed into law. The Russian lower house of the parliament, the State Duma, adopted the amendments to the criminal code on Tuesday, which would impose tougher punishment for crimes committed during wartime, martial law, or mobilization period. So if we are now classifying ourselves as during wartime, these punishments come into play. Changes include harsher punishments for looting or going AWOL during wartime, committing any crime during a period of mobilization. They also criminalize the sabotage of defense contracts. The bill was introduced on Tuesday. It was swiftly passed by the Duma in 3 readings because we're efficient, unlike what you're doing in the West where you have to have a reading and then the next meeting a reading and then the next meeting a reading. We're doing it 1, 2, 3. We're efficient. The upper house was of the parliament. The federal council is expected to pass the legislation as soon as Wednesday. Such crimes such as disobey of a lawful order, violation of military regulations by service personnel, such felonies committed in wartime or during an armed conflict will be punished by a longer prison term. Briefly leaving the service without official leave could land a soldier a disciplinary unit for a year before, but now that same act could be punishable by 5 to 10 years according to the new law. Military mobilization, which is not mentioned in the criminal code, now will be added to the list. If the bill is signed into law in its present form, the wording would also be updated to add martial law and wartime instead of the current conditions of military conflict or military action. Pravda, a Russian bill related to military service has been submitted to the State Duma. The State Duma unanimously adopted the law that introduces the concepts of mobilization, martial law, and wartime as the language under which this happens. One of the things that this bill does is deal with those who voluntarily surrender, who are trying to get out of their service by surrendering to the enemy. Those who voluntarily surrender shall be punished with a prison term of up to 10 years. Prison terms for desertion are to be increased. Now, there is some fear that this will lead to full mobilization that couldn't be further from the truth. State Duma Deputy Andrei Katarpolov, one of the authors of the amendments to introduce the concepts of mobilization and martial law and wartime into the criminal code, said that there will be no general mobilization. This is just to make the sanctions tougher during mobilization. MP believes that the fears of general mobilization in Russia are absolutely unjustified. Martial law could be implemented in certain cases or in certain areas. Okay, the closest similarity is a counter-terrorist operation in the regime during the first and the second Chechenian campaign. So certain areas might be things like in the full mobilization in the Donetsk and the Luhansk and the Zaporizhzhia and KHERSON region after they have chosen to become part of Mother Russia. Okay, now we'll turn our attention to Western propaganda. Here is Interfax Ukraine, lies and lies multiplied. The so-called referendums, what? So-called, they're not even spelling correctly, the so-called referendums in the temporarily occupied Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson regions will not change Ukraine's plans on deoccupation. Russia can schedule referendums and other similar provincial theater performances for any dates. It does not matter for Ukraine. The Nazis are going to just keep coming. That's all that they do. This is how they are. This is why we must stop them. All of our territories, including Kherson, Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, were and remain Ukrainian in line with international law. Well, Crimea voted 97% with an 80-something% turnout to join Russia, as will the other territories like Kherson and Donetsk and Luhansk. The referendum itself, in the midst of the war and the active counteroffensive, quote, looks not just absurdly, but exclusively in the style of Russia's special idiocy of the recent days. Now that's what he is saying here, and this is why we can't trust their media. We can't trust the empire of lies, the United States that backs them, and Western propaganda. So thank you for listening to this, as I've tried to give you the true news from the Russian perspective. Wow, that was taxing. I hope you actually don't like this episode because I don't want to have to try to do this from the Russian perspective again. I'd rather just talk about the Russian perspective than try to step into it. But that's what people in Russia are going to be experiencing. And here's what's going to happen. The Russians are going to have an overwhelming referendum in these 4 oblasts of Ukraine, try to carve it out legally, and then say, see, 90% of the people said that they want to join Russia, so they're now Russia. And now if you attack that, you're attacking Russia. You're not attacking part of this contested area. You're and so with that, they will further mobilize. Now, I don't think it'll go to general mobilization. This is my prediction. I could be wrong. I don't think it'll go to general mobilization, but they will mobilize the people of Luhansk and Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia and Kherson. So that's what's going to happen. Now you have a whole new army that cropped up for you to fight against them. And so and with the penalties of desertion for, if you voluntarily go over, it's 10 years yeah, so it's bad. That's what's coming down the pike. Okay, thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this episode and you're still here, please subscribe. If you are already subscribed, please like, because that'll tell the algorithm that this video should be seen by more and more people. And what we're trying to do is spread this message of what's going on actively in Ukraine today. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you're the kind of person that cares about what's going on in Ukraine.